Welcome to Daily Scary Tales, where nightmares come to life. Hit subscribe and share the horror with your friends, if they're brave enough, as the frosty winter winds howl across the barren landscape, bringing with them a deep sense of isolation. Mysteries tend to surface that send chills down your spine. Today, I'll tell you 3 spine-tingling true stories to remind you. Winter isn't only about snow angels and hot cocoa. Sometimes it's about what lurks in the snowy shadows. Story 1. The Frosted Footprints. Our first story begins in a remote cabin deep in the Yukon wilderness. A family of 4, the Whitmans, decided to spend Christmas away from the noise of the city. The cabin had been in the family for generations, and the stories about its history were as old as the timber beams holding it up. The first few days were peaceful. Snow fell softly outside, and the warmth from the fireplace made the small home feel like a winter sanctuary. But things took a turn the night of Christmas Eve. It started when Alex, the father, woke up in the middle of the night to what he thought was the sound of a child giggling outside. He froze in confusion, but ultimately went to check on his 2 kids. They were sound asleep. The next morning, the family prepared for their festive day, but Alex decided to step out to gather more firewood. That's when he saw them. Small footprints, unmistakably from a child, leading from the woods to the cabin's door and then back again. The strange thing, they were barefoot. As Alex followed the trail into the woods, they abruptly stopped. No other footprints or signs of anyone leaving. That night, the family huddled in the living room, locking all doors and windows. The laughter returned, but this time accompanied by faint knocking on the windows. But in an area completely snowed in and isolated for miles. How? They left the cabin early next morning, abandoning their holidays, and never returned. To this day, locals say a mysterious giggling child haunts those woods, knocking on cabins to look for warmth. But no one ever answers long enough to find out. Story 2. The Ice Tunnel of Despair. Hannah, a solo hiker, loved chasing adventures. But one journey into the snowy Alps became a memory she'd never forget, or forgive herself for. She'd decided to explore an old mine shaft known for ice formations. It was said to be beautiful, but perilous. She took safety precautions, but as she entered, an icy drafts sent shivers down her spine. She couldn't shake the claustrophobia creeping into her. The tunnel twisted downward, much farther than she anticipated. Strangely, shards of ice formed almost human-like outlines along the walls. Was it her overactive imagination, or did one of the icy shadows move? She shook it off, but as she ventured deeper, she heard the faint sound of sobbing, a man's sorrowful cry that echoed through the icy caverns. Certain someone was in trouble, Hannah pressed on. Eventually, she found something even more chilling. An old lantern on the ground, still faintly glowing. Beside it was the frozen form of a man, eyes wide open in eternal terror. She didn't stay long to examine, because the sobbing was closing in. It wasn't ahead of her anymore. It was behind her. Hannah ran. She stumbled out into daylight, heart pounding, but despite her proximity to safety, she swore the sobbing followed her home. No matter where she was, even on quiet winter nights in her city apartment, she still hears that sound. Was the ice tunnel cursed, or perhaps did she bring something back with her? Story 3. The Whiteout Ghost of Silent Hollow. Winter storms. They're beautiful, but deadly. And for Paul, a truck driver, one storm changed his life forever. Driving was his livelihood, and he prided himself in fearlessly tackling even the fiercest weather. But one trip hauling salt outside Silent Hollow nearly cost him everything. A historic blizzard swept the area that night, enveloping Paul's truck in a total whiteout. He knew the road like the back of his hand, but couldn't see more than a foot ahead of him. Slowing down, he rolled forward carefully. That's when he saw her. A woman stood just ahead on the road, wearing nothing more than a tattered white dress. She wasn't shivering, didn't look afraid, but her dark, vacant eyes locked with Paul's before she pointed toward the side of the road. Against his instinct, Paul pulled over and got out of his truck, shouting into the storm. He couldn't find her anywhere. But just before he got back into his truck, the snow shifted under his boot, and he stumbled onto the edge of an enormous open sinkhole. It had been hidden by the blizzard. His stomach dropped. Had he driven a few more meters without stopping, he would have plunged to his death. When authorities arrived the next morning to inspect what could have caused the sinkhole, Paul explained about the woman. The officer's face turned pale as he listened. "You're not the first to say that," the officer whispered. "She's the whiteout ghost. They say she appears to warn travelers, but why she does it, no one knows. Do the wrong thing and she might not help." Paul gave up that route forever, but he never stopped telling others about the whiteout ghost that saved his life. Was it intervention from beyond, or simply an accident of timing? In moments like these, truth's eeriness outweighs fiction. So, that's it for this episode of Daily Scary Tales. 3 disturbing true winter horror stories. The world holds so many mysteries, and the snow hides many chills, whether they're in the air or in your heart. Which of these stories kept you up at night? Or maybe you've had your own winter horror encounter. Comment below to tell your tale. You might just make it into one of our episodes. Until next time, remember, in the silence of winter, you never know who or what may be watching.